We cannot be afraid of being called fascists when we enforce the law. Let me just pause real quick. In 5 days, what are we going? We're going on 6 days. Leftists in 3 different instances have opened fire on law enforcement who have sworn an oath to the Constitution to uphold its laws and enforce them as they have been passed by Congress. Donald Trump won the popular vote. What these law enforcement officers are doing is the will of the voters. That is democracy. The agents came out with less lethal weapons because they're not trying to cause permanent harm to the people who are protesting. In response, they opened fire. I am surprised at the restraint of these law enforcement, considering in the past week, we've seen 2 ambushes. You'd think these officers would already be coming out with at least one guy prepped to use lethal force to put down an armed terrorist ambush. With a group like this and one guy pulling out a gun and opening fire, they all must be arrested and charged. Yep. We cannot be sitting here saying, no, hold on, guys. Let's just err on the benefit of the doubt that these people had no idea that there was going to be another armed ambush for the 3rd time in a week. No. We can't do that. These people need to be made aware of a few things. One, we believe that based on the news, let me pause it like this. These protesters know more about the protests than you do, than I do, than any of us here or anyone online, because they're directly involved in the organization of these things. So you have to go to me and say, who do you think knows more about the planned actions? The actual people on the ground in that moment or strangers on the internet? And I'm going to say, I'm pretty sure the people who are there, who are told when to be there and why they should be there, know more. Okay, so then you think it's likely that these people are aware of the ambush on CBP and ICE last week? Probably yes, because these people are having meetings about resistance to ICE. So the probability they know that there is violence against cops, 2 cops have been shot, is substantially greater than the average American. When they show up within the same week and a guy draws a gun, I say, if you are in these groups of people that are attempting to kill law enforcement, you will get arrested and charged. And what does that mean? Maybe we don't go seditious conspiracy. Maybe you want to be a little, forgiving. Fine. That means they get a charge with, accomplice to attempted murder or assault on an officer, whatever it might be. But they all must be arrested and charged for the actions of the one guy with the gun.
It makes me think of the January 6th with all those people getting arrested that were just there, trespassing, the Trump up charges. And similar with the riot
It is completely different, Ian. If there had been a riot at the Capitol, and then 3 days later, another riot at the Capitol, and then a week later, 1,000 people showed up and there was a riot at the Capitol, I'd say, at what point are we going to be like, yo, those people knew a riot was going to happen? Like, it's the 3rd time it happened.
Well, the government said they knew beforehand.
Without evidence.
They hit seditious. Well, they had texts like, hey, we're going to go to the Capitol.
No, that's not correct. The people who walked in and were milling about.
Oh, yeah, those people weren't
exactly.
Involved. There were some people that were planning to go.
If you rioted, you should have been arrested on January 6th.
And you got to define riot. Is it yelling?
No, it was the people who were punching cops and smashing windows and forcing their way in the building.
People blocking, standing between that guy and the other cop. You draw a line somewhere.
You're saying the people who are involved in the riot, and there is evidence that they were violent towards cops and smashed and vandalized, you charge them for the riot.
And that guy that fired the gun, you charge him for firing the gun. That's my argument.
Because this is the 3rd time, and this is the 3rd time we've had an ambush on law enforcement, and these people are coordinated and organized. It's a little bit different. If there was a random group of people after the shooting, let's say right now, because this is live, let's say they disperse. Then 7 people walk up and are walking around pointing cameras. If the cops went to those random people and arrest them and charge them with conspiracy, I completely agree. That makes no sense. They had no idea what was going on. They're walking down a public road. For the people on January 6th who walked into a building on the other side where there's no riot and the doors were already open and they're like, I don't know, it's a public building. You're normally allowed to go in it. Why charge those people? This is the difference. Anybody who was in the riot, I believe, should have been charged. Now, I agree with the pardons on J6 because 3 years is long enough. It's a little too long for a riot, in my opinion. A couple of years is fine for assaulting an officer and vandalizing and desecrating or whatever you want to call it.
I think you would have to prove that the people in the crowd with that guy who opened fire had been there before in order to say that they were conspiring.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm going to say this one more time. I don't care what terrorists who are trying to murder cops say about me.
That's what they said about the January 6 people. They were
I don't care. It doesn't matter, Ian, because you're completely wrong. Facts are on our side.
What are you talking about?
Okay, let's try this one more time. We here read and watch the news all day, every day, and we are well aware of the true facts of January 6th. That is, a riot did occur. It was bad. People did assault officers. That is bad. Vandalism occurred. That is bad. But the state went after people who didn't do anything. People who an hour later were walking around in the grass, or Owen Schroyer, who never went in the building, or Brendan Struck, who never went in the building. I am saying these people are actively in a small group. During the same week where 2 other immigration officers were fired upon, and they're dressing in a way where they were told to dress to coordinate their actions.
The uniform's interesting. Maybe you could argue if they're there in uniform.
I would argue this. Again, if there was a riot at the Capitol, and then 3 days later there was a riot at the Capitol, and then 3 days later there was a riot at the Capitol, at that point, I'd argue, I think the people who are showing up are well aware that the intention is to riot at the Capitol. Now, I don't know about hunting them down across the country and trying to give them 20 years. Like I said, 3 years was too long. But for these people who are shooting cops, nobody on January 6th shot a cop. The media lied about cops dying. So what do you get charged with for assaulting an officer in a riot? Maybe a couple of years. Instead, they put people in solitary for 3 without even giving them a trial in some circumstances, or withholding evidence. That's dramatically different. My point is, you've got a cluster of like 20 people who have meetings, direct action, they've organized, they've shut up, and a guy pulled a gun and shot and tried to murder law enforcement.
I want to know the funding. I want to know about the organization. This is exactly what I'm talking about. If there is a conspiracy here and people are grouping, it's not just emergent, we got to know who. Like you said, what do? How do we stop this without bringing the boot down? You figure out who's paying these people. There's a global culture war right now.
Bring the boot down.
Maybe you got to do both, but you got to figure out why is this? Because if you just stop these, new people will emerge and do the same role if it's being funded by a communist global organization.
You're using the same argument that you were using with the pedophiles too here.
Trying to stop the person doesn't stop the behavior.
But you know, I want to talk about this part.
One last point. Maybe when people who show up and provide cover for armed terrorists who are trying to murder cops, maybe when they get arrested and charged, and again, I'll say this, for the people that are party to that group who are apprised of the meeting and the action and the plans, maybe they'll say, I had no idea he'd draw a gun. Okay, well, you still get a year in jail for that. You're party to a group that tried to murder police, okay? Maybe when that happens, people stop showing up and giving cover to armed terrorists who are trying to murder law enforcement.
Yeah, if you're there in a uniform, man, and somebody else with your uniform on opens fire, commits a crime, I mean, your organization should be called a terrorist for one guy's actions.
Let me ask you this. What do you think would happen if your buddy he said, hey, can you give me a ride to the bank real quick? I got to deposit a check.
Oh, and he went and robbed the bank.
And then he pulls out a gun and runs to the building. Of course.
You'd be accomplice, even though you didn't know. You might get a reduced charge if you truly didn't know what was going on. But I would imagine you'd be implicated. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but you know, you were talking about the issue where people are afraid, like especially on the Republican side, of being called fascists or whatever. But the political ramifications of that, I don't think, outside of like MSNBC pundits and such, that run-of-the-mill Americans are not going to side with you on cracking down on rioters that are opening fire on police officers.
This is still a 60%, 70% of
higher
Americans
than
want
60.
want to see illegals deported. They don't want to see police being injured. They don't want to see rioters.
It goes further than that when you're talking about shooting police officers. What are we at, 80-20 now?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. This is such a safe bet for the Trump administration to bring the boot down on, because nobody likes this stuff. Nobody wants to see rioters. Nobody wants to see people hurting cops. Nobody wants to see illegals staying in the country and taking spaces at the hospital, taking up spaces on any kind of government assistance roles. The American people have made it very clear that they want to see deportations of illegal immigrants, not just criminal aliens, but actually the ones that are committing crimes, but even people that are here illegally, and if they're just, trying to keep their head down, the American people want to see illegals sent home. This is not a hard problem for the administration.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.